Happy Thursday. At least I'll try to make it happy.
So we have
Hello, hello.
the time finalized for that Tuesday at 2 to 4. Was that
I believe
changed
Tuesday
at
so.
some point?
What's that?
It
KubeCon.
did change. At KubeCon, there's a meeting, and it did change. Amy had originally switched this with another meeting. She was slacking about that earlier, where she swapped the times between two different meetings by accident.
Cool. I should be able to arrive at least before 3. So I assume everyone won't wrap up, but I think my plane actually lands like just before 1, and I'm just gonna head straight to the center. So
I won't be there, but I'll always be on the Zoom.
yeah, I'm not sure who said they were going to be there last time. Start on the agenda items. We have quite a few here.
Yeah, it looks like a full
Maybe
house.
one.
Go ahead.
Oh, so I was going to mention just one thing I want to put on people's radar. This isn't really related to any agenda items. I in Berlin last week, where a significant amount of what I ended up doing was explaining and socializing OCI formats. I just wanted to put this on people's agenda, something that might actually be relevant to a lot of people here. SigStore, Cosign, and Tough also, as well as a lot of secure supply chain efforts that people here are working on, were a significant focus. And there was definitely a significant underrepresentation of people familiar with the OCI containers world, despite the fact that it was something that a lot of people had an interest in. So just putting that out there as something, maybe see if your employer wants to send you there next year if it happens again, slash, it exists.
Was there like homebrew representation there? Because I know they
Homebrew
using
was quite
OCI
well
for a while.
represented. I would say in terms of representation, it was us weird Python folks, and then it was Homebrew, and then it was NPM and the Node.js ecosystem were kind of the most well represented ecosystems.
Do the homebrew folks evangelize OCI at all, or is that just a detail
No, because it's an implementation detail that one person wrote and then GitHub offered, but they don't really I mean, this was a whole like actually discussion I had with the Homebrew folks. I don't want to get too far into it, but we had a whole discussion about like they only use a single tar layer and actually maybe they should consider using more layers, but they don't have the code for that to unpack multiple layers because they just consider the OCI stuff a wrapper around a tar ball. And so actually their code didn't change very much when they moved from bin tray to GitHub Container Registry because they just added a wrapper that basically just, oh, where do I get the blob? Um, and then it just, otherwise the code is identical to the old bottle code. It's actually not that OCI-ish, if that makes sense. It's just a fancy way to put a blob on a server.
I mean, that's all distribution spec is, right?
Ultimately, yeah. I guess what I should say is that like most of the code in Homebrew is not OCI aware. There's one little API client that asks where do I get the singular blob that's always a tar GZ, and that's it.
Cool. So I've got a handful of things listed in the actionable items that I don't think we necessarily need to go over, but I just wanted to point them out for maintainers to see and be aware of from those in the list. Just things need a couple reviews in there to yay or nay them. And I think we've already gone through in this meeting a bunch of them to yay or nay already. So if you are a distribution or image spec maintainer, feel free to have a look at those.
Oh, I need to move mine I put mine in the wrong section.
I saw yours in there, Derek, and that's
Yeah, you
going to
can move it
be our
over.
next item.
Yeah.
Let me move that down right now because it's literally our
Oh,
next
okay,
discussion.
that's I guess that's on there, so you can remove it. It's kind of the
It is,
same.
but I'll put it down with where we're talking about it. And we can either talk about that now, or do people want to discuss the agenda for KubeCon? I can also move the agenda for KubeCon down, but I'm worried that if I did that, we might run out of time and forget to do that. let's go ahead and knock out the agenda quick. That way, if people are still showing up, they don't miss the conversation they really want to have.
So the format for KubeCon is going to be that there's a Zoom meeting going on, and
it's like this, but a bunch of people in person with a shared microphone somewhere in there, and everybody huddled around, hopefully able to hear, and then people on remote usually aren't able to hear. But yeah, shared room get you in person, which is nice, and the rest of us just remote in as best we can.
okay,
And
yeah,
it'll
because
be the
sometimes it's just like
same.
eating snacks and chatting. Other times it's real agenda. So
Yeah, I think it'll be the same Zoom link as this one. So if you are remote, just jump on this normal Zoom as always. And that is on which day is it? 7th?
Tuesday.
Is that Tuesday? Yeah.
Tuesday, unless it changed. Yeah.
Yeah. So skip our Thursday meeting next week, I assume. We'll have already had one on Tuesday, and half folks will be there in person anyway. So why bother? Does that sound good to everybody?
Sounds good.
I hear no objections. So we'll go ahead and put that in there. As next week will be canceled on the Thursday. Otherwise, agenda, I threw a couple random items in there to think about. I'm happy to see more. If people have interesting topics they think would make sense to talk about in person. Hey, VBETs. Yeah, any of those, I put like status for the various specs. I think it's been a year since like the runtime and the image spec maintainers. Some of us aren't face to face or paying attention to each other's repo to see what's happening in each of the different sides. So sometimes it's nice to get a little feel for what's happening there. And maybe a quick update on what the working groups are up to. We got a couple of them going right now. And so just to make people aware of what's happening in the different areas. I thought it might be interesting if we want to talk about any future working group ideas, just to get those floated out there for people to think about. And then otherwise, the only thing I had left to think about on my side was just like a working session to try to knock out some of these blockers and get the image and distribution 1.1 releases. So we think we're close to a GA, which I feel like we're getting close. Hopefully today we'll get even closer. Are there other items people would like to talk about? Yeah, the good call out there, John, from the Tag App Delivery, their artifact working group. I've been attending those as well, so I don't know if I'm the best person to chat about because I don't fully understand exactly what they're doing. But if they don't have anybody that wants to come back, I can also talk about that as well. So I'll put that in there as another item. And this is just me throwing out ideas. Anybody that has other ideas, please interject.
Look good to me.
Figure make the most valuable use of your time while you're there in person. If nothing else, it's the face-to-face more than anything, which I would be sad to have missed. Okay, now for the reason everybody showed up here today. The registries must allow the subject field. We had issue 43, we were taking the vote on that one. And if I look through that, I don't see a clear, like it, a little bit more for option 1, which I feel like option 1 is going to fall into an option 3 eventually. It's just short term, it'll stay in option 1. And slightly less of a minority there for option 2. So I don't think we have a clear direction looking at this from the community of one way or the other than probably a no action more than anything else. Does that sound about right to other people? Eric, I know you and Bjorn were looking at this one a lot.
I
Are you
didn't
comfortable
find
saying
any
no action based off of this? Or
I would say no signal based off of this, but
yeah. Thank you for leading the vote there, Bjorn. That was helpful.
I guess there is a Derek. Do you want to bring up your comment on that issue / your kind of
I
orthogonal
can.
proposal?
Yeah, I guess this is kind of an option four almost, which I guess is inevitable. I just dropped it not too long ago. I've been having some discussions with some folks about what some of the core concerns are around the data model stuff, and I think I've been pretty vocal before that my opinion is kind of the compatibility mode is better than the refers API, at least for like solving some of these core issues. So the proposal is pretty basic. Basically just says that we should just add a put endpoint to the refers API, which behaves nearly identical to put of a manifest endpoint. The only thing I would say is different is we should add should language there around supporting conditional HTTP, so that we don't end up with the same sort of update problem we have today with multi-arc manifests. Ideally, we would push registries to solve some of that problem through conditional HTTP. But other than that, like I listed a bunch of solutions I think this causes, or this solves around like some of the issues with the. So I don't know if you want me to go through each of those line by line or give folks a chance to look over it. As I said, I just added it. I would say the core issue that I'm having, and I think some of the other maintainers weren't a fan of either, is the deviation from the data model in the distribution spec, which is essentially that, you know, we have this Merkle DAG of objects, and you know the consistency of the Merkle DAG is guaranteed through the root digest, and the way of resolving that root digest is through tagging, or in this case through the refers API, or you could use any sort of external tag store like was being done in Notary v1 in order to do that. But once you've gotten that, everything behaves the same as any other Merkle lookup. You can verify everything, and you just start from the root and go down.
I'm trying to understand this, where you're going with this. The put to the refers API, would that then mean that it ignores the subject field if it's included in there, or do you still have to put it after?
It just means that the subject field, I mean, you just look at it as you would look at any other dependency. The subject field doesn't necessarily have to have special meaning, but the registry could. So I didn't remove the to say that a registry cannot auto-generate the set of refers based on the subject field. Like a registry still could do that, although based on every discussion we've had over the last like 2 months, it just doesn't seem like a good idea to do that based on everything related to consistency. So I would put all
like, as I understand it.
Maybe rephrase my question. If I do a put against that digest that I did the put on, does that need to be pointing to a manifest that already exists that's already been pushed to the registry?
You would put the manifest there. The put is on the manifest. Like you would put the index there.
What Derek is proposing, like as I understand it, is basically we obviate the need to have any special semantics or interpretation for the subject field as the registry. So we sidestep this whole graph integrity issue because we basically move to a world where an uploading client generates the referer's response. And it's not an implicitly automatically generated index that's built by the registry, where the registry then might leak its opinions into how it wants to generate that. It's just another index that is discoverable via two endpoints, similar to how, you know, the entire tag mapping scheme allows it to be discoverable by subject and not just by not just by the identity of the index that enumerates those related pieces of content. So it's an attempt to like sidestep the need to impose any specific semantics on the subject field by making the default option for referrers similar to the compatibility method of using the tag schema.
So how is this better than just a registry not implementing the refers API and letting the clients fall back to the tag API, the tag schema?
Sure, I tried to put what I thought were the solutions.
I'm still reading, so go ahead and go through it.
Yeah. First I just think it makes the clients much simpler, because today we have that clients must support the compatibility mode anyways, which is in kind of a weird method of like, so from a client perspective, I upload manifests, refers manifests, and then you get to the end and now you have two states that you can potentially, like, one, you don't do anything because you think the registry has already handled it, or two, you actually have to upload the entire manifest to that special tag schema. The weirdness about that is it forces the clients to try to determine up front, before it even does these operations, whether or not it thinks that the registry is going to support that endpoint. Whereas here, you just do the put, and if it fails, you just fall back to the other put, which is kind of how we tend to handle fallbacks in other APIs. So right now it's kind of weird, because you would put everything up and then you do a get, and if you get like a 404 on the get refers, then you would fall back to doing the tag schema. Whereas here you would just do the same logic as you would be doing for the compatibility mode, which is already at a must be supported language. You just do that logic first, and if you fail on the conditional the conditional put of the refers index, then you just fall back to the tag schema. So I think it's actually much simpler from a client perspective to implement this, and it's way cleaner from a get perspective, because you know what you're going to get, because you're going to get what the client wants you to get, not what the registry thinks that the client wants, or what everything that the registry has seen before, which is potentially a lot of stuff.
So I feel like we're losing the race condition protection against race conditions.
Yeah, that's why I put in the language around the conditional HTTP, which we have today. We have this race condition today around multi-arc manifests, and I'm sure Joseph can talk about some of the solutions that have been implemented for that, at least for like some of the official images on the hub. But yeah, it's a known issue to update indexes, but HTTP has semantics for solving that already. We just should add language that they should be there essentially for the refers endpoint, whereas there's no language that say they should be there, only that they may for the manifest endpoint.
John has a very old PR that's been sitting out there asking for us to support the whole E tag and conditionals.
We should. We should support conditionals, because it does help a lot of things, but whether they can be relied on or not is that a registry has implemented it leads to that tricky case of, if a registry hasn't implemented conditionals, then what do you do? You're kind of stuck in the same situation you are today, though. So I think it's just strictly better to support conditionals without any downsides.
I think the pushback we were hearing was that some registries could not, just because if you have an eventually consistent backend, by definition, you can't support conditionals.
Yeah, and that's what I said. It should. And if you do not have conditionals, you end up in the same case we're all in today, where you potentially have race conditions.
I'm going to say thanks for writing this up, because it clarifies what I was confused about the last time you sort of had concerns. I think with the established concern, and I think I'm sure a lot of us do. We need to spend more time thinking about this. But with the established concern that you've written, it's clear and it certainly makes sense. I think I guess the question I have is like maybe the overarching concern of, I think adhering to the existing data model is a good thing. Not breaking it is a good thing. Having a new feature that diverges from it or exposes a different behavior maybe is not a bad thing. But I think if we're going to assert that that's something we want to avoid, then this makes sense. I think it's unfortunate to be having this conversation now and not a year ago, but so be it. We'll just move on from that.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a tricky situation now where I feel like we're a little bit blocked on it. So there's yeah, you could say the block is human in nature, but I think there's technical blocks where if enough folks don't want to change the data model, then 1.1 is hopelessly stuck. Whereas I'm trying to tailor the change that it's relatively simple to implement. It's basically just a new HTTP handler, and everything else is mostly the same. Conditional would be new to implement, but I said I think registries should be doing that already, and it's not bad to request that registries implement conditional HTTP.
If that's the case, now say let's get John's PR merged.
What happens if there's one question I had? You have a registry may generate the refers index. What are the caveats around consistency? Like presumably that means a client could also put a refers index that doesn't match.
I think the caveat is you don't know when the list is complete. So you don't know if you have a full list of artifacts because nobody said this is a complete list of artifacts. Only the registry says this is what I've seen. Whereas this case, like the client says, this is a complete list of artifacts because I'm finished uploading my artifacts. I put something. So there was a lot of back and forth around what like the completion of the refers looks like. Is it a transactional API? Is it like the tagging thing that Brandon didn't like? Like how do we determine that the refers is done? And so like we had different ideas around that. But yeah, this kind of solves that problem. If you generate it, then you have that same issue. You don't actually know when you have a complete list.
I mean, you'll still never know you have a complete list. You still have to go through recursively if you can't guarantee that somebody's pushed all the refers first. And so as long as this is saying that I can push all my refers first, then I'm fine. I need to read through this some more to understand how this changed the DAG concerns that you had before. So I mean, maybe I just need to do some more homework.
Essentially, like it's kind of what we talked about before, because we talked about if I do a get on refers and you're supporting transactional, it should 404 before the list is done. And this will explicitly 404 if you're not auto-generating. So if you're not auto-generating, there's a 404 until you've completed and you do a put. So it handles that in a little bit more explicit manner, but it gives the registries an option to not auto-generate that list. And I think that should be the preferred method because it doesn't get in this weird state of like, oops, I fetched a half complete list of refers. If that makes sense.
But then it requires clients to, in order to not get that 404, to push the refers list manifest.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which clients already have to do for the compatibility case. So it's not adding new functionality there. It's just reordering it essentially.
I mean, this is pedantic, but it's worth saying that the spec doesn't enforce implementation decisions on clients. You don't have to do that. You could just optionally march into the future blindly. But like I said,
it does, but there is explicit must language in there, which I am supportive of, because there are a lot of cases where you're going to be dealing with older registries that don't have this. But I mean, I don't know what a client that doesn't implement it is categorized as, since we don't really flag clients as having specific levels of support. So
right.
I need to spend more time reading this, but yeah, I think
sorry for dropping it last. I wanted to get it done earlier in the week, but it was like this morning. I was like, I should write all this stuff up before the call was in my mind. I did talk to a few folks about it. I see Stephen Day's on the call. Chatted with him a little bit about the data model stuff, and I'd love to hear John Johnson's opinion on some of this stuff too. Stephen,
I have opinions. Stephen Davis here. Hi. It's too early in the morning for me to have digested this completely. But I do think a departure from the data model makes sense, because this is a departure from what current behavior makes sense, where we only go downward in the DAG. Maybe it would make sense for me to talk to you and ask a lot of questions, because I think I missed a lot of context over the last few weeks. That I don't know if those have been uploaded yet, but
that's been the story of OCI. Like, we have a discussion, somebody's gone for 2 weeks, come back, and then
yeah.
I think this one might be a good case, because I tried to get through everything. So Derek sent me a bunch of links, and I tried to read through it, and it might be good to have like a conflict summary here, where we can say, like, okay, what's the situation? What are the options? Who's recommending what? And lay all that out, so we can assess both the like impact of each option and make a like an informed decision. I mean, like, if that makes sense, because I'm not sure I understand all the different options. It's because it's like, okay, so there's some history, so we introduced this like subject field with refers in it, and then we have this like refers API in the registry, and then now we have this problem about like going from bottom up DAG construction to kind of top down or incomplete DAG construction with signatures done afterwards. So just getting all of that context together, and then like, hey, what are the actual options? I think if we do that, like, we can get, because like I'm in the same place as John. I loaded some of this into my cache a couple weeks ago with Derek, and then like I've since lost some of it. I think John maybe is in the same spot. So
I think the shortest way that I've described it in the past that I think helps make sense and clear is that both of us are coming at this from a data consistency model, from our own perspective. And the difference in perspective is whether or not that subject makes the signature the root of the DAG, and the image that it signs a child of that signature, a child node of that. Or should it be two separate DAGs so that the client can treat that refers API as almost like a parent? And the way the clients walk it, the clients are walking down, they're pushing the image, they're pushing the blobs, they're pushing all the content. Their logic of how they process it is that they like to see all the layers ahead of time. They like to see all the signatures ahead of time and then push that signed image, so that way the image is signed as soon as it's uploaded. From the registry server side, they see that digest hanging off of the signature, and they want that node to already exist. And so they want to see that signature pushed after the image is pushed, because that's the way they draw the DAG.
But how can you sign something that's not assembled? I think you break referential integrity. So I think that's a great explanation.
Well,
I think
you have it locally.
You haven't
to be
pushed
clear,
it.
It's the upload order. It's the upload order. You've generated the totality. You could represent it as an OCI bundle. You could represent it as whatever local representation you want. You just haven't, it's what order do you push the consistent, all the digest correctly encapsulating each other content to the registry? Can you push that out of order? Like, it's almost like, can I push the index before I push the platform specific manifest?
Yeah. And out of order, the answer that depends on your perspective of the order. And each of us has a different perspective of it.
Yeah. And I think there's also a conceptual touch point that we probably missed clarifying maybe as much as 18 months ago. Wherein if we conceptually view artifacts, like refer our artifacts as part of an image, like you have a multi-architecture image, we use OCI indexes. Each sub-image is part of that image. I think the subject field and the digest that it points to, in my mind, is more of a pointer. So I feel like like I said, I have to spend more time thinking about this. And again, thank you, Derek, for writing it down. I really appreciate that, because I wasn't getting it, because I think my head conceptually isn't there, of the need to have a referring artifact and then rebuild a DAG from the bottom up. It's just not something I'd considered before. So there's timing, and there's also, are these two DAGs, one which points to another? And I don't even know if I have an opinion formulated on that. I just think that that's the way that we have been thinking. I don't know if others agree with me. But I think that conceptually we should clarify that somewhere as part of whatever this work is. Does that make sense to anybody? This is a hard one to read right now.
No, yeah, that makes sense. Derek, could you clarify it in this issue that you linked here? This pull request? Or is there another spot where you clarified it?
Which part?
Yeah, because I think if we have a drawing here, it will make this kind of obvious. Right, because we'll see.
Yeah, we should put drawings. I think people have asked for drawings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I just don't think we should deviate from the Merkle DAG perspective and the registry side. Like, I think that's what or at least on the distribution spec, like the distribution spec is designed around the Merkle DAG, and all the other conceptual DAGs are kind of like meta DAGs on top of that, which is fine from like understanding like how you pull something and, understanding the feature. But I think once you get down to the distribution level of it, like we don't need to deviate from kind of some of these core aspects of the Merkle DAG. And, the API is designed around it for a reason. Like we've figured out all of these consistency issues, like around like how secure it is, how do we update it, like where do we start our pull from and stuff like that. And so I don't think that I don't think that the deviation is necessary here. And it's not to say that this is not changing the refers feature at all. In fact, the pull of the refers is exactly the same, and the push from my perspective is almost exactly the same. It's just whether or not we're intentionally trying to break the Merkle DAG data model for what I see as not a good reason around it. I mean, you can certainly make that argument that the refers is not a Merkle DAG because the subject field is queried after, or the object with the subject field is queried after. But from that perspective, it's like, well, we still have the same exact call stack with this sort of change with preserving the data model. I don't know if that made any sense either, though.
It did to me. I would clarify that I wasn't making an argument. I was more explaining where at least my head was at, hoping that it would bring other people along for the ride. Because I mean, we had a lot of conversations, and I think conceptually we really never thought of this as a deviation. But I could be wrong. Maybe people went into this eyes wide open and said, "Yeah, no, we aren't doing that." But everything you're saying does make sense, and I think on the sort of on the people blocker thing. This has been kind of rattling around in my head since you said it. I think, yeah, it is a technical issue, and I think it's perfectly valid for people to bring technical issues, right? I certainly don't perceive this as a people blocking thing. I think it's more of a, there's a valid technical concern that we need to work through. So I think it's good. Just to clarify things that I have said in the past that were responded to. So.
Can I share
No, you
screen?
can't.
I
Go ahead,
can't.
Steve-O. You can't?
Okay. I mean,
Uh,
hold on, make sure it's the
Someone's
right
got to have that
screen.
permission, right?
I was getting ready to share myself, but if you want to share, go ahead.
Yeah, there we go. Well, I have the dumbest diagram in the world. Can you all see that?
Oh, see, my diagram's prettier than yours.
Yeah. Okay. So this is what we're talking about, though, right? We have an image index, and we have some image refs, and then we have kind of in the layers, or like in the whatever that index field is. I think it's images or layers or something like that. And then we have a signature, which is also like an image index with a subject in it that's referring to this manifest pack. Is that the like intended layout?
Yeah, that's kind of what exists today.
Okay. Yeah, and then the so DAG order would be one images, two image, and this is way oversimplified just to keep this up. So this is DAG order, right? Do we all agree with that?
I think that's when Brandon's saying that from the perspective of a client using the registry, he considers it to be a separate graph. Like that's the crux of it. Is from the registry implementer standpoint, it's yes, that is the DAG, but from the client standpoint, it's no, this isn't a contiguous graph. This is just some other related graph that happens to point at this one, but there's no strong binding. That's kind of the point of contention.
There's no strong. Well, does this have a tag to it? Because this will normally have let's say we have. Oh no, whoops. So we have tags here.
So when I say there's not a strong binding, what I mean is that like the idea is that I could have a manifest, and that manifest could have a subject, and just because that manifest has a subject, in the world where we keep the language as is, just because that manifest has a subject doesn't mean I can't push it, even though the thing even though the descriptor of that subject is not live yet. The current spec language requires that I must accept that with a descriptor that refers to content that doesn't exist, because that content may exist later. So that's the separate graph. It is that like that arrow, you have the right angle arrow there. Is it necessarily an arrow? It's more of like a fuzzy connection.
Okay.
Or really or the way Brandon's described it is it's an arbitrary key it's an arbitrary key used for a select statement in a SQL database. It's just an arbitrary key to query on. And it's not actually a graph relationship.
So just to clarify here, we're not using subject in the image index itself, correct?
Not in the
not in the simple case we're talking about,
but not in this.
Well, because like you can't really have a subject that would refer back to a signature that would then sign itself.
No.
For the purposes of this argument, the subject exists in signature. And I think you asked, does it have a tag? It could optionally have a tag. Right now, it's an independent manifest in the registry that in the repo that could have a tag, but it's optional. It doesn't share a tag.
Yeah. The SIG-store case, or let's say like the cosine case, excuse me. The cosine case is untagged manifest that has a subject that refers to some content.
Okay. And then you want it, so the like free order, like we'll call that's the alternative. We want to be able to like upload the signature first, and then maybe the image index. We're talking about just relaxing this order.
Well, no. Today, so the thing is, it's a carve out. Like again, if you look at the language that's referred to in that issue, it's a special case only for subject. So the way that the spec is written today, image index must come after the image and layers. Image and layers must always come before image index, and it's only that the restriction that the descriptor must be valid that's only relaxed for referrers for subject. Otherwise, the traditional ordering still applies. Like, it's not that we relaxed everything. It's that specifically there was an exception, a carve out, a special case for subject.
Well, so why do we want to be able to upload this without uploading an image first? Like, what's the use case there?
That's a Brandon question, because I think
the use
that was
case
the
to-
original point of contention, is that
Yeah, okay.
not
So
everybody agrees with that. Yeah.
the use case to be able to
3.
upload a signature. Sorry, someone else. I'm not cutting off.
Go ahead, Brandon.
The use case to upload the signature first is that you want to be able to say, as soon as someone sees my image on the registry, it's already signed. So they know the content is already there before, as soon as it is available. And
and
critically,
critically,
higher level.
and critically, the other thing that's been a little, there's a lot of points of contention here, but the other point of contention with that is that when Brandon says live, he means, is the digest observable? And I posit that live is the content discoverable. So that is to say that if I have a tag, I don't have to push the tag until the signature's up. Or if I trigger a downstream CI job, which is conceptually equivalent 100% to a tag, in my opinion, it's a mechanism to discover a digest. You don't have to do that until your signature is live.
Okay, so the fundamental problem is we don't have this like transactional thing to say, hey, the image is cooked, we're good to go. Go and pull it. So we're saying, hey, let's push the signature before we push the image.
We did before it was called the DAG. Once we add the artifacts to it, where you draw the artifact in the DAG picture changes how you want to define this.
Well, it's really the signature, right? Whether this is an artifact or an image shouldn't matter, right?
So what I would say is that, like, there's some part of it is that people want some way to signal the completeness of a list of referrers. Okay. And one way to achieve that is potentially by trying to encode it into the distribution side by having certain referrers live before the content's live. And also, I think we should John's got his hand up.
Yeah, let John.
Yeah, I think so. Brandon's use case of clients discovering images before they're signed is valid. I also want to put forth the idea that it would be interesting if a registry can forbid unsigned images from even existing in the first place, which is interesting to me personally. The other use case that I think is interesting here is if you wanted to separate the storage of, say, signatures from the storage of the actual images. One use case there is for access control. Let's say you want witnesses or something to be able to sign stuff but not push runnable images to your prod repo. It's nice to be able to have a secondary repo that has different access control that you can sign things in it, and those would reference nothing, right? Because the actual images wouldn't be there.
On that one, though, I want to point out that what we're talking about, like the proposal in the we change the language case, would be I change must to may, or rather we remove the carve out for subject. I've posted the text in the chat. So you could still do that. There is nothing today. There's nothing that stops you from saying, yeah, I'll take an index before the manifest. That's how people, registries that support sparse images, where not all the platforms of a given image have to be present. That's how it works today. So at least for that last one, I don't think there's anything with the proposed language change that would preclude you from doing that.
Here's
Maybe
the
I don't
alternate
understand
image.
what the proposed changes.
Let me get my chat one back up too. So yeah, the proposed change is for them to say that, hey, if you've got this subject field, a registry is allowed to reject you. And just because a registry is allowed to reject you for trying to push that artifact with a subject pointing something doesn't exist, what they're saying, John, is that you could still make a registry that does allow you to do it. It's not saying the registry couldn't, but it does mean you couldn't depend on that behavior.
Yeah, that's I would like to depend on that behavior, I guess.
Yeah. So yeah, in a different picture, if you've got your multi-platform index, it's pointing to an image, config layers. We've all seen that picture. We've got the refers response is an index itself. So let me put down there for that. This is also an index. That's going to give you back, if you've got a signature or something like that, and the signature itself is in there, you probably got an artifact type field. And it's got this subject descriptor that points back to the image. And yeah, I think the big question here is, once you put that pointer, does this have to be pushed first before this is ever pushed? And from clients, when clients are looking at it, clients say, well, hey, I'm pushing this image. This is content that is part of that image to them. Because when you think about the way they query it, they don't go and query the signature and then go find their image from the subject in that image and then go download all the layers of it. They've downloaded the image and they query and say, does this image have a signature to it? And then they walk that in the reverse path. It's just because of the way the APIs work.
And this goes a little bit back to my continual statement that, like, well, if the content was that critical and the content is part of the identity of the image, why isn't it encoded in the DAG of that image and in the digest of that image by making it part of the index itself?
We can go down a long path on that one too.
Yeah.
What I will say on this one is we call it subject right now, and because people know what that subject field is, they're going to put it in the DAG and they're going to include it, and they're going to say that, hey, the signature has a subject field, it points to the image, so we're going to require that exist. If this wasn't subject, if this was called Brandon field, a registry wouldn't do anything with it. It wouldn't be part of the DAG, even if it was a full descriptor.
Right, but you are asking the registry to interpret that field and to return a response based on it, right? Because like if it was Brandon field, then your refers API wouldn't work either. Like the refers API imposes that the registry interprets that field in a specific way.
The refers API may not work, but I could always upload a fallback tag or something in that case.
Sure, but then we kind of go back to like Derek's point of like, do we even need referrers if we want? I mean, if we want to walk that out all the way.
Yeah, I think there was another question in here, which was, hey, does the index have a subject field? And just as an FYI, yes, an index does have a subject field in it. So you could make a really ugly picture that has the index and artifact, its child having a child in there, and it's subject pointing to one of those children. And this can go multiple layers down or something like that, or through other refers. You can make weird pictures like this if you wanted to.
You can do
clients,
it, but it wasn't necessarily required for the example.
Not required, not part of the design of what we want them to do with it. Just be aware, because of the way the clients walk this, the clients, if they're going recursive through this stuff, they can get themselves into loops because of this.
That's why it's not a DAG though. The DAG is the Merkle DAG. From the Merkle DAG, this is correct. Yeah.
That's why when I draw it, I don't include this as really a line to me. It's two separate DAGs. To say it's one DAG feels a little odd to me, but that's where our opinions differ.
Like the contention is over if that subject is a strong, like if that's, the strong black line, like everything else here, or if this is, a weaker link that is
that's what I meant
a special
by
case in all the other object relationships. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I meant by pointer, if that wasn't clear. Yeah. So I agree. Not that I'm not willing to entertain something else, but I want to make sure that everybody understands that's kind of where at least some folks' heads are at.
All right. So that was the big picture. Steve, does that help?
Thanks for the drawing.
Yeah, I mean, I understand it, and I understand the viewpoints. I mean, I think in one case, we can push up a valid image, and it's still valid whether it has a signature or not. And then in the other case, what's the point of a signature without a subject that doesn't exist? So that would have to be handled on the client side. Since it's rather new, I mean, I think we could make clients handle that race condition. But like, I don't see why you wouldn't want to have the image exist before you push the subject. Because the only thing I think of, like, the reason we did it like this, and I had to go back and look at like some old notes. Like, the reason we did it like this was because if you do the validation for valid stuff coming into the registry at the registry, you do that validation in one place for the most part. Whereas if you allow that validation to escape out of the clients, now all your clients have to do this validation. And not that the clients shouldn't do the validation, it's just non-performant when it happens. And the classic example is the like partially pushed multi-arc images, where you would have people pulling in multi-arc images, and ARM would be gone because it hadn't been built for latest yet. But I don't know that we have that, because like, why would I pull a signature if I don't know about the image yet? Like, I have to know about the image to pull the signature in the first place.
So that's kind of what I mean.
Yeah.
Sorry, not to cut you off too much, but like that's what I mean when I say basically the content discovery is actually the load bearing part here. Is that if you push content, I mean the distribution spec doesn't say anything about durability or consistency, actually, right? I mean, I've talked a lot with Brandon about how you could just throw the image in dev null and technically you could be perfectly spec compliant. So to me, like, it's not even like, if you argue like
that's like a malicious reading of the specification, but sure.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Yeah. But like, but it's a tortured example, just like, Brandon's like weird subject referring to the content there from the index. But what I was trying to get at is that the spec doesn't actually describe durability or consistency. So if one is arguing that like, I want to push the signature before the image because that way I can ensure that the signatures were correctly published before I even try to push the image, and then I just abort the whole operation if that's not the case. I mean, kind of my argument is that, well, if you actually want to be sure that the content is correct in the registry before you let anybody know the content exists, whether that's via a tag or some other mechanism, you almost need to read it back from the registry and make sure that the registry has what you put in it, in which case it's not, there are no advantages to pushing the signature first. So that's kind of my take on that.
So I'll give you the example from me as a person that copies content from registry to registry. If I know my source pushes the content and they're done, I know it's coming out of a CI pipeline. I know it's coming from some source where it's generated and done when it's done. And I'm taking this from one registry to another, one repo to another. If I copy this from the client perspective, I'm given the index and it says copy this recursively. I will follow it down to the image. I check my refers and I see I need to copy a signature and a bunch of these other things in there. And I'll start working that. So I've walked this path reverse already at that point as a client. If I push it that way, then as soon as I see the image already exists, I know that I've already pushed the signature.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, I keep on wanting not to get hung up on that one, because there's if I know that this is the certain way it publishes carries a lot of weight, and then like there are
very much an if, but this follows the way so many people are pushing this content to registries today. They're generating this in a CI pipeline, 90% of them. And so
but then also like there's the content discovery. There's the content discovery though, of like, you got that digest from somewhere. So, and that's what I keep on wanting to. I mean, again, I don't want to get too hung up on this. I want to make sure other people have a little bit of time, but that's the bit I keep on getting hung up on, is like, the digest came from somewhere. You can't conjure a digest out of the aether. Somebody digested some content and let you know about it. And that ideally is the stage where you wouldn't start your pipeline that tries to do this mirroring until whoever was notifying you, via whatever mechanism is used, says, yes, I pushed all the content. It's good for you to start mirroring and doing whatever with.
Yeah. So to jump into Steve-O's comment earlier of, hey, if this gets interrupted partway through, if I push some of this content and partway through it gets interrupted, if I go through in that certain order where I walk this structure down and then I follow the refers response to find this content, and then I copy that content over there, and then I push this image afterwards, I know that I've done all of these things already. And so me as a client can almost start to treat that like a DAG. But that arrow is reversed the way I'm treating it. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I just dropped my hand. I've been holding
go
something
ahead,
here. So, Steve, if you want to reply, I mean, mine is more of a meta point about the way we're thinking about this. Well, if you have a reply to what Brandon was saying.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to point out is like, it's very rare. So for systems that are doing cut through push, it's very rare that they're going to be able to calculate the signature before they've pushed the completeness of the image. If you
Yeah.
build all the
Yes,
image,
but if
get the
but if
digest
I'm getting this from a
locally,
source, if I've got this already pushed to one registry and I'm copying it to a second registry, if I've uploaded to GitHub Container Registry and I'm copying it over to the Docker Hub, or vice versa.
So I think what I was going to say is germane here. So as we go off and think about this more, which I hope we all do, I think we're over abusing the idea that the main use case here is a signature on an image that is all created at a build time at a certain point in time, right? A big part of this is that an image can get pushed and signed the next day. It can be signed by multiple notarizing parties. It could be attestations of other kinds. It could be SBOMs. It could be, Brandon, what's our favorite artifact type? Pictures of your cat. So it could be anything, and it could come later. And so I think that is the big, I think that's the big gotcha here as far as me thinking about this as a pointer to an image that exists. Partial push multi-platform image, I totally grok that, but I don't think it's the same as considering a signature that isn't there to be a partial push. And that's why I see these as two DAGs, right?
And I mean, I think that's the kind of one of the points of contention right there, Jesse, is some referrers being more significant than others. Some referrers you should wait for, and other referrers are just cat photos that somebody added later. And trying to have some semantic for a client to tell the difference between these are the important referrers and these are not the important referrers based on the temporal element of these referrers were present from, epoch 0 of this image.
Let me make a better example because we're going to run out of time. And the cat pictures is a funny that goes back with Brandon and I for 2 years, right? So let me use a better example. Notation used with a managed service like AWS Signer may provide revocation, which some end user use cases find very important. Other signing solutions, sticking with signatures, don't do that. For example, cosign with SigStore doesn't have revocation. They don't find it valuable. It's not part of their thing. So what I might do as someone who doesn't have revocation, but I need that for my SecOps approval, is I might every 12 hours sign an image. So the idea that an event fires somewhere from a pipeline and I copy the image with its signature isn't always relevant. So I want to just keep that in scope as saying, I might have an image that's a week old and it goes through 14 different lifecycle signatures until I then expire that content out and then I have a new image. So while it's very important that we think in terms of, hey, I've got an event and I want to copy that data, we also might be replicating data across multiple regions on the globe, and that data is created after the image. It's new data that is created as a different artifact within the registry that points to the subject image. So that's kind of the model here that I think we can't lose track of because it's very important.
I'm in strong agreement on that one. It's whenever I draw the picture and you go through that path, that it is a scenario that I want to be able to support. It's not the only scenario, and there are definitely others.
I mean, and that's fair. Like I think we've had a lot of cases of basically picking on cosign, but there are other use cases beyond cosign. And I mean, at least to me, that kind of makes me more convicted that Derek's proposal is a good one because it helps me have that atomic, like, what are all the referrers that this thing has? And I can capture that and I can compare between two registries and I can go, okay, reconcile, make A like B more straightforwardly than the server-side generation.
Yeah, and just
and
for
there's
anybody
gotchas there
trying
because
to
some people might want to do server-side generation, but
for sure. Yeah, and maybe you could have that as a service and some commercial offering, right? Exactly. I think for anybody trying to catch up here, this one's been a little noodly because I think we're talking about two different things, and some of us are very aware of that, and we're interchangeably going between them. We should probably spend some time to like really separate these things out. But this, I mean, I think this is a very good conversation, and I think it's gotten us further to understanding both of these things that we're trying to dig at. I guess we'll talk more next week, some of us. I don't know how many people are ending up in that room, by the way, because it's in a conference day. It's not a day 0 day, and it's like during sessions. So I don't know. Maybe folks on Zoom will have more we'll have maybe more people on the Zoom than we do in person.
I don't know how you could pass up an OCI meeting, but if that's what
I'll
people
be
have to
there.
do, I understand.
I'll be there.
Oh, wait, there's going to be a KubeCon Zoom meeting that we can hop on.
The
Yeah,
same Zoom meeting we have for this, you can jump on next week during the OCI meeting, and they'll be
Okay.
in person there. With
As I understand
attendance.
it, this is going to be a 2-hour meeting. Same bat channel, just a different bat time, and 2 hours long.
I thought
Is
you
it
were
still
going
going to be
somewhere
that
else
crazy?
starting. I thought you were going somewhere else with Bat.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
time and
I guess
details are in our HackMD.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say that. We can put it on the Slack as well. So good to see some of y'all. I haven't seen in a while.
A lot of people showed up. Thanks, everybody.
Always
All
fun.
right, see some of you
Always
next
fun
week.
to jump
Sounds
into
good.
Thanks for driving.
a good discussion.
Good to see you as always.
Bye-bye.